with the biological, the sort of disease thing. I think that we have to have a more humane way of doing things, and I know that rabbits are a terrible pest and they're a terrible cost, but I struggle with that, I would rather see some of those other methods that, was just mentioned before. That would be great.
4 minutes to 5 on the panel on Friday afternoon. It wouldn't be a week without talking about the Donald, would it? Like a scene from Harry Potter, the Tower of the Evil Voldemort. Or in this case, Donald Trump was really and truly struck by lightning.
The eye of Sauron was just...
on the very night of the primaries on Tuesday night. It's surely more than a coincidence that Trump Tower in Chicago was struck by lightning.
If that's not a sign, I don't know what
The
is.
first sign, there must be 3. The first was when the bald eagle had a go at him. Remember when he tried to...
Yes.
Now Trump Tower's been hit by Zeus.
That's it.
So there's got to be a third sign.
There's
I don't know what it is.
some vengeful smiting going on. It's got to be, yeah.
Did you know Donald Trump has just been listed as a global threat, literally a global threat, by research company The Economist Intelligence Unit? He's rated as riskier than Britain leaving the European Union or an armed clash in the South China Sea. The EIU has given Trump a rating of 12 out of 25, the same level of risk as the rising threat of jihadi terrorism destabilising the global economy. I mean, he's probably proud of this. I don't know.
No, he would
But
be.
that's only if he becomes president, right?
Yes, and the intelligence unit actually discounts the probability. They think it's unlikely that he'll defeat Hillary Clinton, who is likely to be the Democratic contender. Let's do that first, okay? Trump versus Clinton, your pick. Golnaz, go first.
Who would I pick?
Who will win?
Oh.
I know who you'll pick.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, I don't know.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. It's so unpredictable. I was really, really hoping that this was all crazy and just fun and media and all that, and then it looks like he might just get the candidacy. So I you know what? I'm praying so hard to that non-existent God and to Mother Nature that he doesn't get it and that America becomes sane again.
Tell us what you really think. Catherine?
Well, there is still a chance that he's not going to get the nomination. I mean, there is many a sort of step between. I mean, he has to get a certain number of delegates, doesn't he? And he's further ahead than Ted Cruz. But they can still have a free-for-all at the Republican convention. They can still basically kind of, I don't know, stuff them in a cupboard somewhere and vote someone else in.
Absolutely right. The Republicans anti-Trump Republicans are considering mounting a third-party challenge.
Exactly. That's right. They're thinking of trying to find somebody to come out there.
The thing that interests me in that case is, what would a Donald Trump do if he is thwarted by such sort of chicanery?
Well, the rumour is that he might set up as an independent candidate, which he can do. And in which case, if he splits that, then Hillary Clinton's a shoo-in, really, I would have thought.
But either way, whether he wins or loses or whatever happens, we've now set a new benchmark, a new precedent. So who's next?
A president.
It's the crazy candidate list coming up. Kanye West has already said he'll run for president. I think Kid Rock is the next logical candidate. Any other contenders?
Pamela Anderson.
Pamela Anderson, yes. Okay.
Oh, look, Kanye and Kim would be an awesome first couple. Come on. That'd be great.
We've got 1 minute until 5 o'clock, and let's stay with politics just very quickly. There's something that seems to happen to women and not men. How many times has a stranger said the words to the effect of, "Smile, love, it can't be that bad"? It happened to Hillary Clinton after the primaries. She won, but she didn't smile, and someone said that she just had a big night. Smile. What do you think of...
I'd really get some ideas. Good on her for not smiling, because no one would ever say that to a man.
No, and I mean, fortunately, I'm kind of blessed with I don't have what they call the resting bitchy face or whatever it is, When I walk down the street, people smile at me because I seem to be smiling at them. I'm unintentional,
I've got a bad case of that.
Of what, resting bitch face?
Yeah, I do. No, I really do.
Look, that's a whole another discussion, and I'm not sure we should have taken it there. On that note, we are heading up to 5 o'clock. Thank you very much, Catherine Robertson.
Thank you.
And Golnaz Bassam Tabar.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you on the panel. Yes, as I said, coming up to 5 o'clock, Checkpoint with John Campbell follows.
Hello everyone, I think that was a false start, but we have it now. We are here and happening tonight on Checkpoint. Welcome, by the way. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the Checkpoint team. It's lovely to have you with us. Tonight on the program, why some multinationals pay so little tax in New Zealand. This is a big issue and we're going to look at it along with the OECD. Nikki Hager watches the police destroy the material they unlawfully obtained during a police raid. Paris Goebel and 1 billion YouTube viewings for a video clip made in Auckland by young New Zealanders. How long does it take before an air accident is explained? WorkSafe is taking the Hamilton City Council to court over the death of a zookeeper and an Olympian from a sport that doesn't normally get much coverage. We visit her and take the spotlight along with us. All of that and more coming up over the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Leilani Mamoisia with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. Mobile phones, documents and data taken during an illegal police raid have been returned to the journalist Nikki Hager. His property had been sealed in the High Court after it was taken during a search of his home in October 2014. The search was ruled unlawful when a judge found the police failed to disclose relevant information for the warrant. A hard drive that police officers copied his data onto has today been hit multiple times with a hammer to destroy it and given to Mr. Hager. He says the police search was utterly over the top.
I strongly believe that there will be no Rambo police raids into anyone like me or other parts of the media for a long time now. I mean, they've learnt their lesson. They've lost comprehensively, and they'd have to be fools to do it again. So I think this has made everyone safer.
Nikki Hager is still viewing aspects of the search through the courts. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says if it had more money, it could use more technical expertise and staff in its investigations. The widow of the victim of a helicopter crash near Wanaka in 2014 has complained about how long the Commission is taking to investigate the accident. Documents obtained by RNZ under the Official Information Act reveal the Commission has struggled with its level of funding. The Commission's Chief Executive, Lois Hutchinson, says more money would help.
It's not something that we can necessarily speed up. The difference is that we would have more expertise readily available and, if you like, more boots on the ground.
Lois Hutchinson says investigations cannot be completed quickly and the Commission meets international guidelines. A writer on the construction industry says revelations this week over the certification of seismic steel mesh highlights a bigger problem. The Commerce Commission is investigating steel in tube after its mesh product was wrongly certified as having been analysed by an accredited laboratory. It's also widening its investigation into steel mesh products from other companies that failed standards. Mark Graham, who publishes The Building Guide, says there's a big problem with poor quality products.
There should be a large degree of trust that products that are going into people's homes are actually fit for purpose. And how else can you determine that if they are not tested by an accredited laboratory?
Mr Graham says the government needs to tighten the regulatory regime urgently to stop a legacy of poor construction that will cost the country into the future. Restaurant owners in Auckland are rejecting claims by the New Zealand First Leader that illegal immigrants are working in their kitchens. Winston Peters says some in the Indian and Chinese communities say some restaurants are actually fronts for sneaking in thousands of workers illegally, posing as ethnic chefs. The manager of the Golden Garden restaurant on Auckland's Dominion Road, Tony Situ, says he's not aware of anyone hiring illegal chefs.
I don't think it's true. I know everyone working in the restaurant all legally and they've been paid the tax as well. So, yeah, I think it's not true.
Tony Situ says everyone in the sector knows the consequences of breaking the law. Mr Peters is standing by his claims. The Hamilton City Council says it hasn't yet decided how it will plead after being charged over the death of a zoo worker killed by a tiger. Zoo curator Sam Kurewa died in September after being mauled by a male Sumatran tiger named Oz. Andrew McRae reports.
WorkSafe has charged the council with breaching the Health and Safety in Employment Act by failing to take all practical steps to ensure Ms Kurewa was not exposed to hazards while working with the tiger. The council says it won't comment further until it knows the details of the prosecution and how it will plead. The Chief Executive, Richard Briggs, says the council is committed to ensuring staff at the zoo are safe. The charge carries a maximum fine of $250,000. In Hamilton, Andrew McRae.
Part of Auckland's southern motorway will be closed for emergency work overnight after a truck and trailer struck an overbridge. All southbound lanes at the Penrose Overbridge have reopened, but the Transport Agency is advising motorists to allow plenty of time with traffic still heavy. Southbound lanes between the Ellerslie-Panmure off-ramp to the Mount Wellington on-ramp will be closed from midnight until 6 tomorrow morning for emergency work. Into sports news now, the New Zealand pole vaulter Eliza McCartney has finished 5th at the World Indoor Athletics Champs in Portland, Oregon. McCartney cleared 4 metres 70 but failed her 3 attempts at 4 metres 80. Earlier this month, the Aucklanders set a New Zealand and Oceania record at the Outdoor National Track and Field Champs in Dunedin when she cleared 4 metres 80. New Zealand and Australia are set to play their first 2020 cricket match against one another in 6 years at the World Cup in India tonight. The match at Dharamsala at the foot of the Indian Himalayas will be Australia's first at the tournament, while the Black Caps are coming off a 47-run win over hosts India in their opening game. Despite being early in pool play, the match could have a major impact on the semi-final makeup, and Black Caps batsman Ross Taylor says it'll be an intriguing encounter.
We like to bar up and, we get the best out of our players here. And I think these are totally foreign conditions from what we played on in Eden Park and MCG. And, spin, I guess both teams in the past have probably had their moments against spin.
Thunderstorms are forecast ahead of tonight's match. The New Zealand women's team also plays its second match in the tournament tonight against Ireland in Mohali. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a French-flavoured finale. The Cajun music of Texas and Louisiana. That's after 11. Country Life checks out the market gardens of Pukekohe. That's after 9. Dave Raish brings the sport, Eurosport, which is bound to mean football. But explain this week's conundrum and play the winner's song. That's if anyone works it out. And we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to nonsense on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Western Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow and fine spells increasing. The remainder of the North Island, cloudy areas and isolated showers becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland mainly fine, but a few spots of rain in Otago and Southland Saturday morning from high cloud. Nelson, Buller and northern Westland, occasional showers developing. Southern Westland and Fiordland, rain developing this afternoon with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands is mostly cloudy. And I'll be back at 5:30 with headlines. It's now 5:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Leilani. Coming up on Checkpoint, Paris Goebel pulls 1 billion viewings. If you don't know who she is a remarkable young woman. She's going to join us later in the programme. Nicky Hager on the strangest day of his life, and how long does it take to investigate an air accident? All of that and more coming up, including the TPP Roadshow, by the way. But first, tax and how multinational companies get their earnings out of New Zealand with barely a cursory wave to the IRD in some cases. In October of last year, I worked on a podcast about Apple New Zealand. They refused to be interviewed, but their books told a pretty striking story. Over 90% of their revenue gone in costs, even though their operation in New Zealand is tiny. Apple New Zealand had revenue of $568 million and costs of $551 million. That meant their total New Zealand tax bill was $6.8 million on revenue of $568 million. Apple wouldn't talk, but the OECD would. Pascal Saint-Amand is the Director for Tax Policy and Administration at the OECD. They're working on addressing things like base erosion and profit shifting. In short, and in very simple terms, multinational companies declare their costs in higher tax territories and declare their profits in lower tax territories. The OECD put a figure on how much that legal practice is costing global governments in tax revenue, and it's incredible.
It tries to describe how much tax avoidance by multinationals costs to the revenues of the different countries across the world. So $100 billion to $240 billion a year for the whole world is, again, a conservative estimate.
Yes, that's right. The world loses up to $250 billion in revenue every year due to this legal form of tax avoidance. In fact, Pascal Saint-Amand told me the OECD thinks that's a conservative estimate. Today, Matt Nippert of the New Zealand Herald did a really fine job of broadening out, looking at other multinational companies whose tax bills seem low relative to their revenue. You can find that on the New Zealand Herald's website. Shortly, we'll talk to Revenue Minister Michael Woodhouse. But Don Christie was featured in Matt Nippert's article for the New Zealand Herald. He's the co-chair of NZ Rise, an association of New Zealand-owned and operated digital businesses. He's also a director of Catalyst IT, and he joins me now live from the Wellington studio. Don, it's great to have you with us. We often talk about level playing fields. This base erosion and profit shifting, the ability for multinational companies to declare profits in low tax territories and costs in high tax territories, means the playing field isn't level at all, is it?
No, it's incredibly hard to compete if you're a local business, wherever you happen to be in the world, where effectively multinationals that behave in this way, and just be clear, it's not all multinationals that do this, but the multinationals that behave in this way are able to effectively undercut any R&D and investment and so on that we might want to make ourselves in our own countries and in our own businesses.
So your competitors, if they're multinationals, do have the potential to legally put costs in New Zealand, shift profits to a place where the tax is much lower, and therefore pay much lower rates of tax than you have to pay as a New Zealand company.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just look at the cloud companies, for example, the Googles and the Amazons of this world. Last time I looked, Amazon had 1 employee in New Zealand and Google had 2. Cloud companies in New Zealand, such as WebDrive, Datacom and Catalyst, are having to compete with these organisations. And the money that our government and individuals pay to these companies never touches a side. In fact, Matt, although he's done a brilliant job, hasn't even been able to scratch the surface of those revenues because they're not declared anywhere in New Zealand.
So what does that mean for a New Zealand business trying to compete?
Well, it means that, let's say if I've got a government department coming to me looking to do business with me, maybe buy cloud services off me, they will look at my base price and say, well, you're 10% higher than AWS or somebody like that. Whereas the reality is, if you did a proper economic impact assessment, you'd have to take about 30% off our pricing to get a fair comparison of what we're ploughing back into the economy in terms of taxes that our employees earn, taxes that we pay as corporates, GST and so on and so forth, all of which is avoided by other organisations.
Revenue Minister Michael Woodhouse is standing by. He'll be listening to this. What would you like to say to him? What would you like to see done to make this legal practice less easy to do?
Well, there's always the international issues that kind of is being used by Inland Revenue and generally politicians as a whole, not just the current government, as an excuse for inaction. They kind of say, oh, well, the OECD has to act before we can do anything. And I think that's a huge mistake. What New Zealand can do in a number of ways, first of all, they can change our own tax laws, certainly get rid of double taxing, which on international revenues, which encourages bad behaviour. But more sensibly, government agencies who spend 30 to 40% of our GDP across the board can do some economic impact assessment and basically say to these organisations, I'm sorry, we won't buy from you unless you behave like a good corporate citizen. We have companies like IBM New Zealand and so on who do that and who do file credible tax returns. And so they lead by example, and I absolutely have no problem at all competing with those sort of organisations.
Don Christie, co-chair of NZ Rise, an association of New Zealand owned and operated digital businesses, and also director of Catalyst IT. Thank you so much for joining us, Don. Let's bring in now Revenue Minister Michael Woodhouse, who's joining us on the line from Dunedin. Minister, we appreciate you joining us at short notice too, so we're very grateful. What do you say in response to Don Christie and to lots of people like him who are making the same point?
Well, look, I think what we heard was his articulation of what is a very, very complex picture to ensure that those multinational companies pay their fair share of tax. I think that's what everybody would agree is the right thing to do. But if they're talking about the waitlist sort of companies like Google and Facebook, what's not clear in some of those cases is even where that revenue is being earned. So, the Herald expose this morning was interesting. It highlighted a number of companies where turnover was high but tax paid was low. I don't necessarily agree that you can draw the conclusion that there is widespread tax avoidance going on.
Well, hold on a second. Pascal Saneman from the OECD, and he told me that the New Zealand government is working closely with the OECD and that you're being extremely supportive of their initiatives, talks about somewhere in the region of $250 billion a year being lost to global governments.
I think that's right, but what he would also say is the New Zealand tax framework is actually a bit of an exemplar for the avoidance of profit shifting back into other jurisdictions with things like our base erosion policies, our thin cap rules, and a number of other transfer pricing rules that we have in place, which probably lead the OECD in this regard.
So when Simon Mutter, and it's interesting because in fact it's business media and business people who are leading the charge on this, so this isn't some left-wing conspiracy. When Simon Mutter from Spark tells Chris Gill at the NBR or Matt Nippert at the New Zealand Herald, hey, something has to be done about this. This isn't fair. This isn't a level playing field. Are they wrong?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're wrong, but what I would say is that they haven't yet come up with a thing that we could be doing and not. And that, I think, underscores the notoriously complex nature of global trade at the moment. What I have to be confident is that we have good, robust rules in place and enough resources deployed by the Inland Revenue Department to ensure that those companies are paying their fair share of tax. And where there is a global issue, we are contributing through the OECD initiatives to ensure that those loopholes are closed.
Pascal Saneman says that this is the tax laws are anachronistic, that they were actually drafted to cover a world that no longer exists. That is the case, isn't it? I mean, in a way, that's a statement of the obvious. So how are they reinvented in a way that means companies like Apple can do business in New Zealand, but also that they pay the tax they should pay here?
Yeah, well, look, we're already introducing laws that will require companies that provide, for example, waitlist goods internationally to register and pay GST on that. I think that's an important development. We're looking at changes to non-resident withholding tax on income earned. We're also looking at the weighted goods, of course, that are now coming across the border and where the GST should be applied to those. So those are the companies that don't even have necessarily revenue earned in New Zealand. But I think we've got to be a bit careful not to take the Herald descriptions of high levels of turnover and low levels of tax as gospel.
Hold on a second. If we look, it's a striking graph. I've got it open on the table beside me. $9.96 trillion of New Zealand revenue combines $1.8 billion of New Zealand tax. On the face of it, boy, the one thing you can say is they're very inefficient New Zealand companies because their costs are so high.
Yeah, okay. But my concern is obviously for the New Zealand income earned and the legal amount of tax that is due on that taxable income being paid. Take, for example, the drug companies. So we have, on the one hand, a Farm Act model that the drug companies themselves say is so tough on their pricing that it's so hard to make a buck in New Zealand that they threaten to pull the plug and go away. Why would we be surprised then that despite quite a bit of turnover, there is very, very low profit being earned? I think we've got to be a bit careful not to play both sides of that coin. That's just one example of where it's important to look through some of that data that was revealed today. And my responsibility is to say, Have we got a good, robust framework for the collection of income tax on that taxable income, and are we diligent in employing it? I can say yes to both of those things. I'm not suggesting for a moment there isn't more we can do, and you quite rightly point out that this is a very dynamic environment that we need to be nimble to keep up with. And that's what we're doing.
Michael Woodhouse, Minister of Revenue, joining us live on the phone from Dunedin. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We'd love your feedback on this. Coming up, we tour Dominion Road after claims by Winston Peters that illegal immigrants are working in its restaurant kitchens. WorkSafe takes the Hamilton City Council to court over the death of a zookeeper, and journalist Nicky Hager on one of the most extraordinary days of his life. 5:20. Restaurant owners in Auckland are rejecting claims by the New Zealand First Leader that illegal immigrants are working in their kitchens. Winston Peters says some in the Indian and Chinese communities say some restaurants are actually fronts for sneaking in thousands of workers illegally by posing them as ethnic chefs. Mohammed Hassan reports.
Dominion Road is arguably the heart of Auckland's melting pot, pun intended. It reflects the wealth of the city's diversity, with dozens of Chinese, Indian, Japanese, Thai and Korean restaurants lining the street that stretches from Ponsonby to Mount Roskill. In fact, there are so many, Winston Peters thinks not all of them can be viable.
Many of them have been used as a front for immigration, charging significant amounts of money for people to come in here as so-called specialist ethnic chefs, when that's not been the purpose of the original application to come here in the first place.
Tony Setu has managed the Golden Garden restaurant with his father for 3 years. It's tucked cozily behind several other Chinese restaurants on Dominion Road. He says he's not aware of anyone hiring illegal chefs.
I don't think it's true. You know, I know everyone working in a restaurant, they're all legally, and they've been paid the tax as well. So yeah, I think it's not true.
Have you ever employed anyone that was here illegally?
No, definitely not. We obey the law.
He says everyone knows the consequences of breaking the law, and he doesn't see why anyone would. Mani and her husband own and run a Thai restaurant that bears her name. They're new to the area and say they hire a few students on visas that allow them to work part-time.
They are students, some of them, just about 1 or 2 days. Yes, and some of them they have work, open work. Yeah, that means they can work but they do part-time only. Yeah, it's full-time about me and my husband and my daughter.
Kazema Ozawa does have his suspicions. He's owned the traditional Japanese restaurant Banzai for nearly 7 years. I ask him if he knows anyone hiring illegally.
No. But some people can't speak English properly, so if I try to communicate them, they only can speak Chinese. So I don't know how do they get the visa or stuff.
Have you ever hired anyone that wasn't here legally?
No.
Would you ever hire anyone illegally?
No. Why? No, of course not.
Some say they hire only those that speak Chinese because most of their customers are Chinese speakers. All who I spoke to say they've never hired workers illegally, nor are they aware of anyone else doing so. The mayor of Gisborne and the president of the New Zealand Chinese Association, Meng Foon, has hit back at Winston Peters' remarks, calling them cheap politics.
Well, it's always been easy to choose on the Chinese people. I mean, we've been ostracised by law right throughout since Chinese people came to New Zealand through the poll tax, not able to get the pension, not able to be citizens of New Zealand. Now we hear that the Labour Party wishes to actually have quotas on Chinese coming into New Zealand for the restaurant trade.
Meng Foon says that sort of politics is nothing new, but it's about time it stopped. In a statement released this afternoon, Mr. Peters stood by his claims and accused his critics of inverse racism and not giving a damn about immigrants being exploited. For Checkpoint, Mohammed Hassan.
Nicky Hager, investigative journalist, went to the Auckland High Court today and got the documents taken during an unlawful police raid of his Wellington home returned to him. Police searching for the identity of the hacker responsible for many of the documents in dirty politics raided Hager's home in 2014. The High Court later ruled the raid was unlawful and ordered the police return material and destroy their copies of it. Today, that's exactly what happened.
I've just had one of the most extraordinary days of my life, actually. I'm here at the Auckland High Court building, and the police have finally given me back, after 17 months, all the stuff that was taken from my house. And then on top of that, they had copied a whole lot of my files onto their own hard drive and memory card. And I watched down in the basements of the High Court building while the police officers smashed those pieces to bits so that their record of the whole search has now been destroyed.
And so there are no copies. Everything they had of yours has either been returned or destroyed.
Yes, we went down into, exactly right, we went down into this basement building where there weren't proper lights and people held torches and there was a concrete floor and people stood in a circle around this police officer while I counted it, he smashed this big hard drive of theirs 213 times until it was kind of obliterated.
How bizarre.
This is the same police officer who originally took all the stuff from the house, so it was a very dramatic and symbolic way of finishing the whole affair.
If we go back to Justice Clifford's findings, when the warrant was declared unlawful, it says this was an intrusive search, not only of Mr. Haga and Ms. Wells's home, that's your daughter, including her bedroom and personal drawers. So this was the same police officer who was involved in all of that?
He was. He was one of the ones who spent 11 hours going through everything in it. It's a very strange experience, yes, including my daughter's very personal things in her photo albums and her life, which seemed over the top, considering that they should have known that I wasn't the kind of person who would leave anything around, even my desk, that they could find. So, yes, it was over the top, and the point is that they were found to have acted wrongly. In fact,
unlawfully.
Fundamentally unlawfully, and so this is the end. This is the end of it for them. That it didn't work.
Some of the other issues, some of the broader issues, the specifics that it was fundamentally unlawful are well known now, but some of the broader issues, I wonder if they've been canvassed as well. For example, that you weren't given opportunity to claim privilege as a journalist, that this took place in your absence, that no one called you and told you it was taking place, and that you couldn't assert your right as a journalist to claim privilege. Do you think the broader implications of that are understood yet?
No, I don't think so, because in fact, media law is only developing in New Zealand because this is new stuff. We don't get raids all the time on people who have written books or who are writing in the paper and things. This is new, and so, in fact, although it's not stuff people don't know, it's very positive because this is, as we're speaking, it's producing the future protections which will keep journalists and people, investigative journalists like me safe. So people don't know about that, but we're on the way there.
Nikki Haga. WorkSafe is taking the Hamilton City Council to court over the death of a zookeeper. The 43-year-old was mauled to death by a Sumatran tiger at the zoo last September. Reporter Andrew McRae is outside the zoo. Andrew, what can you tell us?
Good evening, John. Yes, WorkSafe filed their charges against the Hamilton City Council in the Hamilton District Court today. So they filed the charges and no date has yet been set for a first appearance. Probably not unexpected. They've been charged under the Health and Safety and Employment Act, which means that anyone who causes or someone who dies in the workplace, and if the WorkSafe think it could have been avoided, they often do take prosecutions. The Hamilton City Council says that they won't make any comment on the laying of the charges today, but they will say that at this stage they haven't decided what plea they will make, whether to plead guilty or not guilty. At the moment, their lawyers from outside and the internal council officers are discussing what to do. They've been looking through the file notes that have been filed with the court by WorkSafe today, and they'll make a decision in good time, I guess, and then it'll go through the court process.
Andrew McRae from Hamilton, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. And we're going to stay with deaths in the workplace. A worker has been killed at a recycling centre at Auckland's North Shore. That's this afternoon. Very sad news. Our reporter Joanna McKenzie is there. Joanna, what do you know about what happened?
Good evening. So far,
RNZ has spoken to Gary Saunders, who's the chief executive of EnviroWaste, who run the Constellation Drive recycling centre down here, just off the motorway, just off the northern motorway. He confirmed that one truck driver had been killed today. The person wasn't an employee of EnviroWaste, but it was on the site here at Constellation Drive. He confirmed that that person had been crushed between the front of a truck and a bin. Emergency services were called at about 3:20. WorkSafe are also notified. They have just arrived in the last 10 minutes. 2 cars pulled in and went through the gates. All the gates here have been closed since I arrived at just after 4:30, and the people on the gates have only been letting in either people who worked here, police, or the WorkSafe employees that just arrived, and a number of EnviroWaste trucks. Other people have been arriving to drop off their garden waste, but have been told to been turned away and told not today. Also, the other person that I spoke to who arrived was somebody from victim support, who arrived shortly before 5 o'clock, but didn't know exactly what had happened, but just said that she was here to give support.
Our reporter Joanna McKenzie live from the recycling centre on Auckland's North Shore. Thank you so much, Joanna. Coming up, Paris Goebel and 1 billion YouTube viewings for a video clip made in Auckland by young New Zealanders. She won New Zealand's first gold medal in Taekwondo last year's Pacific Games. Now 34-year-old Andrea Kilday is off to Rio. And New Zealand volunteer Anna McPhee talks about being held for 10 hours in a Macedonian police station after being mistaken for a refugee illegally crossing the border. All of that and more coming up. But first, Hazy and Nona with business. But here's Leilani with the headlines.
A truck driver has been crushed to death by a bin at an Auckland recycling centre. Emergency services and WorkSafe staff are on the scene at the EnviroWaste station off Constellation Drive. EnviroWaste's chief executive Gary Saunders says a contracted truck driver was crushed to death between a bin and the front of his truck. WorkSafe says it has an inspector investigating. The journalist Nikki Hager has emerged from the High Court in Auckland with all the material seized during an illegal raid on his home. Computers, mobile phones and other property were taken when the police went looking for his sources for his book, Dirty Politics, in October 2014. The operation was later ruled fundamentally unlawful. Mr. Hager says it's an incredibly good day because thousands of files that make up his life have been returned. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says if it had more money, it could use more technical expertise and staff in its investigations. The widow of the victim of a helicopter crash near Wanaka in 2014 has complained about how long the Commission is taking to investigate. Documents obtained by RNZ under the Official Information Act reveal the Commission has struggled with its level of funding. A writer on the construction industry says revelations this week over the certification of seismic steel mesh highlights a bigger problem. Mark Graham, who publishes The Building Guide, says there's a big problem with poor quality products. The Hamilton City Council says it hasn't yet decided how it will plead after being charged over the death of a zoo worker killed by a tiger. Zoo curator Sam Kurewa died in September after being mauled by a male Sumatran tiger named Oz. And it's 27 to 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Leilani. See you in 27 minutes. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. We've missed you, Nona, the last couple of nights. You're going to review the week for us. Tell us about the numbers.
Well, I can tell you that we had a couple of positive indicators today.
Right.
Yeah, we had the ANZ jobs numbers, which were better than last month, although last month was the month before. So January was not very strong. February was better. And that's an improvement, so a positive indicator. Also, we've had the consumer confidence survey this afternoon. Very positive. Not as positive as it's been in the past, but still a good level or historic average. It's about right. And people are more confident than they've been for a while, and they're more confident that in 12 months from now, things are even going to be better for them. So they're out there shopping and so on. It's pretty good. Leading up to Easter, it's got to be a good sign for the retail sector. And what else do we have? Oh, the New Zealand dollar. The Kiwi was flying high, still hanging on to its gains after the U.S. Federal Reserve sort of threw a bit of cold water on some of its rate cuts. So that made the New Zealand dollar fly up high, and we've got it at 68.4 US cents today. 89.3 Australian.
Heading back towards 90 Australian. It's been under 90 for a couple of weeks now, hasn't it?
Yes, that's right. But also our local market hit another record high after a little bit of a dip in the middle of the week. So, hey, finishing up the week pretty high, up 0.75%. That's 50 points to 6,624.
Thank you very much indeed, Nona Peltier, rattling through it tonight. We really appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend.
You too.
Nona Peltier, our Auckland-based business reporter. I'm just updating my rundown, and we're going to Wellington. This has been a fascinating old roadshow, the TPP roadshow. It sparked everything from traffic stopping protests in Auckland to opponents waving sex toys in Christchurch. Yes, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So with workshops being held around the country touted as a chance for the public to have a conversation about the controversial trade deal, what kind of conversation is actually happening at the roadshow? Political reporter Didamelza Leslie went along to the latest workshop in Wellington, to find out.
More than 200 people, clad mostly in suits, were at today's public workshop at the Westpac Stadium in Wellington. With bags searched and names checked off a list at the door, none of the protesters who have been prominent at previous meetings were there. The Trade Minister, Todd McClay, stayed for about an hour, presenting a speech on the benefits of the TPP. But before any questions were asked, the mediator, Sean Plunkett, laid out the ground rules.
Could you identify yourself? Introduce yourself briefly and perhaps why you're interested and why you're here, and then, and quite importantly, ask a question. Because we have had some issues, and I've had people come out to me at the break saying, people haven't been asking questions and I'm here to hear the answers. So if we could have questions rather than perhaps long-winded statements.
An expert in intellectual property law, George Barker, was first up. He was also the first to be reprimanded for not getting straight to the point.
So just to demonstrate why it's wrong, music revenues is a total
what
of 80...
about the question?
No, could I just finish?
Well, no, we need a question, and this is the thing, we've only got 10 minutes, so we need a question.
$80 million, 1% of those sales are in the 50 to 70.
Good.
This is the question. How does this make sense? I'm trying to get my understanding.
The next questionnaire stuck to the rules.
Kia ora, I'm Te Ao Pritchard. I'm the CEO of a Indigenous Professional Association. My question is in reference to the treaty exception. With the difficulty that the government currently has to meet its obligation in ensuring that the treaty agreements are being met currently, and there's so many grievances, what guarantee can you provide us that actually with the TPP agreement you can, in addition to that, actually meet the current treaty obligations first?
Yep, thank you, and that's a great question. We're doing a hui round. New Zealand have done two. So what international trade agreements don't do and shouldn't do is decide what a treaty obligation is.
Ms Pritchard says she was at today's event because she wanted to hear what the government was saying about the trade deal. So was she satisfied with the answer the Minister Todd McClay gave to her question on the treaty?
It's interesting for me that a previous trade agreement on a completely different trade agreement is the
China FTA?
The China, yes,
Yep.
is the basis for this government and the TPPA actually justifying that exception and thinking that's enough? Because this agreement is completely different.
Most people at the workshop said they wanted to find out more information about the deal for work purposes. But there were also a couple of dozen that were worried about how it was going to personally affect them or their grandchildren.
To listen to the rhetoric, really, and to understand what it is that they're promoting.
I've come for two reasons. I've come as an immigration lawyer to see what opportunities and potential snags there are, and as a Māori I'm interested in the Treaty of Waitangi thing.
I'm here from Doctors for Healthy Trade and just interested in getting an idea of their perception of the major health risks involved with the TPP.
Well, yeah, work purposes, I'm working at a law firm in town and had a little bit to do with the TPP.
All of the questions asked were from those who opposed the deal. A common thread was a lack of democratic debate, as summed up by this man.
A lot of statements have been made about the public being consulted in respect to the TPP, but really this is the first time that there's been an open public discussion, and it's after the point at which people can put a statement into the public process or the parliamentary process. So whatever information they get from here, right, they can't feed their concerns back into the select committee process.
The chief negotiator, David Walker, said the deal wasn't a fait accompli.
Yes, you're correct that the Select Committee, in its examination of the text of the agreement and the national interest analysis, it closed its submission date on the 11th, but I think it did indicate that it was open to considering specific case-by-case requests for late submissions.
The Parliamentary Committee reviewing the TPP is expected to report back in May. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
European leaders have gathered in Brussels for a summit to discuss a migrant deal with Turkey aimed at curbing the influx of migrants into Europe. Refugees. Deborah Lutterbeck from Reuters explains.
The scramble for food at a migrant camp in Greece along the border with Macedonia. A woman from Mosul, 9 months pregnant, likely to give birth at the camp. Part of the backdrop as European leaders gather in Brussels where they hope to craft a migrant deal with Turkey to help curb the migrant influx into Europe. Cautious optimism from German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
I believe it is possible, and I'm consciously cautious. I believe it is possible to find such a common position.
Under a proposed plan, Turkey would take back all of the migrants, including Syrian refugees, who have crossed to the Greek islands. The EU would also double an agreed €3 billion fund to help refugees in Turkey. For Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, it's been a waiting game.
I'm waiting today to take a decision to assist Greece in these difficult circumstances.
As thousands linger in camps, the coming hours could be critical. Ankara's central objective in the deal is visa-free travel for Turks to Europe by June. But that will depend on Turkey meeting a raft of long-standing EU criteria. And for thousands stuck in limbo, there are still no guarantees.
Yes, that is certainly true. Working with refugees in a crowded refugee camp on the Greece-Macedonia border is Christchurch volunteer Anna McPhee. We've spoken to Anna a couple of times on the program. She was detained by the Macedonian military earlier in the week after a group of refugees tried to cross a river from their camp to reach Greece. I asked her what happened.
We were held in a police station for about 10 hours with about 50 or 60 volunteers, journalists and reporters.
And what were the circumstances in which you were detained in the first instance? What were you doing at the time?
It was a very complicated situation. There were apparently some brochures that were handed out around the camp the day before, and they're still investigating who did them. They were in Arabic, and they were telling everybody, don't stay here. If you stay here, they're going to send you to Turkey. They're going to deport you. You need to leave. We've found a place where you can go. If you come through here, then you'll be safe, and Macedonia will take you, and you'll get to Germany. It's not true. None of that is true. They also said there's a river that's normally a river, but it's dry at the moment, and you can cross it, which also wasn't true. And so the next morning, about 1,000 refugees planned, and they just started walking. I didn't really plan to go with them, to be quite honest. I was at camp helping supervise a medical team, and I wasn't really being too needed, and I thought I would start to walk with them, with a few people, to try and convince them not to go. So we were saying, don't go, this isn't safe, don't bring your children, the military are there, they're going to hurt you, they're going to tear gas you, this is not a good idea, and nobody would listen. And we kind of just kept walking further and further, trying to stop them. And I thought, okay, if we get up to this point where Macedonia begins and Greece ends, we can at least try and get a location, and we can bring in some medical care, and we can bring in some distribution, and we can help them at this point. And so we started walking to look for this place, and it turns out it's a place where the border just ends. There's no fence, there's nothing, there's no indication that it's not Greece. And all of a sudden we were in Macedonia, and I didn't really, to be honest, I didn't know until we got herded away by the Macedonian military. And they tried to take our group. They took everyone who looked vaguely Western, who had a camera, and they herded them all off. And they were not violent, but there was a lot of shouting, and they had guns, and it was not something you argued with. And I tried to go across with some of the people I knew to get into this crowd of volunteers, but I was walking with my friend who is also a volunteer, but he's of Middle Eastern descent, and he looks like a refugee, and we were helping some people with some things. And so I got shouted, go down there, so I got mistaken for a refugee. So I got taken, sent off in that direction. And you don't really argue with these guys when they're shouting at you with guns to go that way. So we went with them and ended up sitting in a field with a group of refugees in the mud. And they'd split everyone up into groups of maybe 20 or 30 people, and they were guarded. And so we sat in this field for a while. Tried to make it known that we weren't refugees, but I didn't have my passport with me, so I hadn't been planning to cross. They said, do you have documents? No. They sit back down. So sat back down. And it took maybe an hour or so before they changed guards, and we managed to talk to one of the military, and he took us to the police chief on site at the time, and we talked about it, and they searched us and asked us a lot of questions, and then took us through to the police station, where I was met with about 50 other people that I knew who were there already.
Gosh, Anna, what an experience. And it speaks of all sorts of things. One, the desperation in Macedonia to keep people out. Two, the desperation of the refugees themselves to go anywhere.
Yeah, it was very difficult talking to them. It was saying, you risk death if you go here. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous crossing this way. It's illegal, and you shouldn't do it. And they would just say, do you know what? Death is better than where we're coming from, so it doesn't matter. They just keep going.
You know, when you say that, it's really hard for us here in New Zealand to compute it. Are these people so desperate? Are they so downtrodden, so hopeless and so helpless that they're not even afraid of death now?
Yeah, pretty much. They're desperate. They've come through hell, and they're stuck. They're stuck at this place, and now they're being threatened with being sent back, and they don't know what to do.
And what are you going to do now? Because you've worked really hard as a volunteer. Are you going to stay? Are you exhausted? Are you going to come home? What are you going to do, Anna?
I'm going to stay. Of course I'm going to stay. I can't go to Macedonia for 6 months, so I'm not going to go there. But I will stay. I will stay. There's still so much to do here, definitely. I'm tired. I think maybe I need to take a couple of days holiday at some point and get some space from everything. But life continues to go on here. We've still got thousands of refugees. We've got so much to do. So I'll stay.
You listen to Checkpoint, that's Anna McPhee, and we're going to stay on the subject of impressive young New Zealand women. Here's the start of a 10. Which New Zealander has just achieved for the first time ever the milestone of 1 billion views of a single clip on YouTube? Not Lord. Her smash hit Royals has reached over 500 million views, which is impressive. And the official trailer from all 3 Lord of the Rings movies combined has 2.5 million hits. The answer is young Auckland choreographer Paris Goebel, with the video she choreographed, pulled together, cast and featured in for Justin Bieber's track Sorry. Bieber himself isn't in it. This is a Paris Goebel triumph with an all-New Zealand crew of dancers, shot in Auckland last year, 1 billion views and rising fast. The choreographer has just returned to Auckland after working with Rihanna in the States. Paris, 1 billion views. 1 billion.
Yes.
What's that like?
It's pretty cool. Pretty awesome.
No, we've tried to find another New Zealander who's got even close to 1 billion views of something they've done on YouTube. You're it. You're the totality of the billion plus club.
Well, I'm happy. Happy that's me.
It's such a wonderful story of how the video came about and of how quickly you did it. I know you've told it before, would you mind telling it again?
Yeah, so we got a phone call from Scooter Braun, who's Justin Bieber's manager, and he basically gave us like 2 days to put it together, and he told us it was just a lyric video. So in my head I thought, okay, well, we don't need to do too many crazy things. So we did it in a white room. I think it took us about like an hour to put the choreography together, and then the next day we shot it at White Studio, and the girls literally just wore like clothes from my suitcase, and yeah, we just had fun and put it together, and did not think it was gonna be this huge success all over the world.
So just to clarify, between you getting the phone call from Justin Bieber's manager and the completion of the video was 2 days?
Yeah, pretty much.
Paris, do you think people understand how big this is, what a big achievement this is, and you know, what a quintessentially New Zealand achievement this is?
I think people think it's a really cool thing, and I think New Zealand's really proud of it too. I think I don't even understand how big of a thing it is. So yeah, I'm just really proud of it and excited. So yeah.
And who have you been working with? You've just got back from the States. Have you been working with Rihanna?
I have, actually, yes.
She's extraordinary. What's she like to work with?
She's really, really fun. I got along with her really well, and we had really good chemistry, and yeah, she was awesome to work with.
Would you be now the most sought-after choreographer in the world of pop, you know, R&B, hip-hop music?
I think one of them at least.
I reckon the answer is yes, Paris. When you started out, when you formed the company aged 15, did you ever dream any of this was possible? I think possibly, actually, you did have a sense you could do this.
I think that it didn't really kick in, the belief, till I was about 18. You know, once things start happening, you realise what you're capable of as a human being, and it doesn't matter, you know, what you have or where you're from. Like, you really start to realise that, you know, every human being in the world has a chance at making it in whatever they do. It's just what you do with your talent. So I think, yeah, at 18, I really started to see I can do this. So once things started happening, it never stopped, and it hasn't slowed down since.
To sport now, or are we going to WOMAD first? We're going to WOMAD first? We're going to WOMAD first. New Plymouth has secured at least 3 more years for the WOMAD Festival, which attracts thousands of visitors to the city, staying with the music theme. The festival kicks off in New Plymouth tonight and will feature more than 400 artists from 22 countries. The Taranaki Arts Festival Trust has put on WOMAD at Brooklands Park since 2003 after it failed to gain traction in Auckland. It's been a phenomenal success there. Music critic Nick Bollinger is part of the RNZ team there for the weekend. Welcome, Nick. Nice to talk to you. What are the highlights for you this weekend?
Oh, God, too many and too numerous to name. What I always look forward to are the obscure things that, you know, come from places I didn't know existed, and people playing instruments I've never seen before. And I've just been looking at the program. There's a Ukrainian band called Daka Braka. Their music's described as folk drone or ethno chaos. Now, I mean, that's irresistible to me. I love what they refer to as the desert blues, which is this music from northern Africa, West Africa, really, Mali, and there's a group called Songhai Blues, who are the young vanguard of that music, and they're going to be playing this weekend. I'm looking forward to them a lot too.
It's such a fantastic venue, isn't it, Nick? It's such. I mean, look, people watching people listening on the radio. There's this lovely basin surrounded by trees behind you. It's such a great place to watch music.
It's a great place to watch music, and I think the musicians really appreciate the environment here too. I don't think they come to anywhere like this anywhere else in the world. So that brings something special out of them as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a great place. Yesterday, apparently, there was torrential rain here, and the bowl that people who are watching this can see behind me was actually overflowing. But the music gods seem to be smiling now. The sun's come out late this afternoon, and it's going to be a beautiful weekend.
Nick, enjoy it. Nick is part of the RNZ team. There'll be lots of coverage on Music 101 tomorrow afternoon from WOMAD in New Plymouth, where the sun really does look like it's shining. To sport now, and Andrea Kilday found out today she will be New Zealand's only representative for Taekwondo in Rio. The 34-year-old mum won New Zealand's first gold medal at the Pacific Games last year. That's in the sport. Today she told our sports reporter Matt Chatterton about her Olympic hopes, how New Zealand has never won a martial arts medal, and how the point system in Taekwondo works.
So if you do just a normal instep to the body, that's 1 point. If you do a turning kick to the body, it's 2 points. A headshot, so just a standard instep to the face or hammer kick to the face, is 3 points, and then a turning kick to the head is 4 points, and a punch is 1 point.
And heading to Rio, we've never won a gold medal, or won a medal for that matter, in martial arts. What is that like as a prospect, having the opportunity to win the first medal in martial arts for New Zealand?
It's a really good feeling, like to go out there and then having the opportunity to actually really now go and have the chance to medal. It's a goal for me, so that's what I'm aiming for.
And I also understand that you have quite a bit of a life to juggle. Could you give us a bit of a run through of how you go about managing your life outside of Taekwondo with your life of Taekwondo?
Outside Taekwondo, it's pretty much get up, get my 2 boys ready, take them to school, go to work, pick them up, come home, get them dinner, and then go to training, and then come home and sleep. That's a day-to-day thing.
How many hours of training do you have to do a day or week? What's the run-through?
I'm training every day, so I come here Monday and Wednesday and normally Friday in the morning, and we go and do fitness, so stair running, and hopping up the stairs, and then kicking here and fitness kicking, and then at night also training as well here.
I suppose looking after 2 boys must be a bit of training by itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's not easy at all. So.
How do you manage to manage all that time? Because I imagine it's quite difficult trying to do all those things at once.
I don't know. I actually don't know how I fit it all in. I honestly don't know. I just manage somehow.
That is Matt Chatterton speaking to Andrea Kilday, who was New Zealand's first ever representative in Taekwondo at the Olympics. We've never won a martial arts medal at the Olympics. Let's take a look briefly at the rest of the weekend's sport. Tonight the Black Caps play Australia in their second match at the World T20 in India. Then later on the White Ferns play Ireland in their second match as well. They'll both be great games. On the rugby front, the Hurricanes are playing the Western Force in Palmerston North tonight at 7:30. That'll be followed by the Waratahs Highlanders match in Sydney. That'll be a cracker. Tomorrow the Crusaders host the Kings in Christchurch. Who knows how the Kings will travel. While it's the Battle of the Colours in Brisbane, the Blues are playing a really out-of-sorts Queensland Reds. Then on Sunday morning, the Chiefs play the first ever Super Rugby game in Argentina against the Jaguars. Also on Sunday, the Warriors play their first home game of the National Rugby League season against the Melbourne Storm at Mount Smart. They need to win that, obviously. And the Wellington Phoenix in football play Perth in the A-League. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. Leilani has come in with the RNZ News and is sitting beside me. But first, facing criticism over their treatment of marine mammals, SeaWorld Entertainment says it will stop breeding killer whales, and those currently at its park will be the last. This report from Gillian Kitchener.
SeaWorld says it will stop breeding killer whales. The company says the 29 orcas currently at its parks or on loan to third parties will be the last. SeaWorld's announcement is a small victory for animal rights activists who have been pressuring the company to end its public exhibition of killer whales altogether. And California regulators had previously said they would bar SeaWorld San Diego from continuing to breed killer whales, or orcas, if it went ahead with a planned expansion of their artificial habitat. The company's first killer whale was born in a SeaWorld park in 1985. Since then, 30 have been born in the parks, including the first ever births through artificial insemination. But in the face of growing protest, SeaWorld is now acting to repair criticism over its treatment of marine mammals and dwindling attendances.
The time is up. 1 minute to 6. That report from Reuters. I'm just having correspondence with the control room and saying, could they play the sting? You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ. We're going to go straight into the news at 6 o'clock tonight with Leilani, and we're going to tell you what's coming up after that. The widow of a man who died in a helicopter crash speaks out about the Transport Accident Investigation Commission. She wonders why it takes so long to tell her how and why her husband died, and whether, in the meantime, as the investigation unfolds, they're as communicative as they might possibly be. Affordable waterfront homes promised to low-income iwi, and we've also got pizza served by robots. All of that coming up after 6 o'clock. Here's the pips. Kia ora everyone, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. Half an hour left in the program tonight. Lots in it though, and a very important issue around air accident investigations. Are they funded enough and are they humane enough in the process? All of that and more coming up. But first, here's Leilani Mamoisia with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. A truck driver has been crushed to death at an Auckland recycling centre. Emergency services and WorkSafe staff are on the scene at Enviro Waste Refuse Station off Constellation Drive on the North Shore. The Enviro Waste Chief Executive, Gary Saunders, says the contractor was crushed between a bin and the front of his truck. In a statement, he says the company is devastated and is focusing on his family. It says the driver worked for a waste collection company that uses the transfer station, and Enviro Waste will try to find out exactly what happened. The gates to the centre have been closed and the staff have not been commenting. WorkSafe says it is investigating, and 2 officials have arrived at the scene in the last hour. A representative from Victim Support is also on site to help staff. Steel and Tube now say that it does not have a laboratory for testing its reinforcing mesh. The listed company is under investigation over using an accredited lab's logo on test certificates when in fact its testing is done in-house. Its test certificates have on them the title Laboratory Manager and a name underneath. However, a Steel and Tube spokesperson this afternoon said it does not have a lab and does not use scientists to do in-house testing. Rather, its seismic mesh and other products are tested in a factory, and its factory manager, Anish Chand, is named on its test certificates as Laboratory Manager. The journalist Nikki Hager has emerged from the High Court in Auckland with all the material seized during an illegal raid on his home. Computers, mobile phones and other property were taken when police went looking for his sources for his book, Dirty Politics, in October 2014. The operation was later ruled fundamentally unlawful. Kim Baker-Wilson was at court.
Nikki Hager says it's an incredibly good day because his thousands of files that make up his life have been returned. He's also been given a destroyed police hard drive that officers copied his data onto. Mr. Hager says the detective who was in charge of taking his things today took a hammer and hit the hard drive 213 times. He says he's pleased he has his data back because it makes up his future projects and livelihood. He's still seeking further action through the courts over the raid. In Auckland, Kim Baker-Wilson.
The widow of a man killed in a helicopter crash in 2014 has criticised the Transport Accident Investigation Commission for failing to communicate properly with her, and she just hopes they're doing a good job. Jerome Box died when a Squirrel helicopter carrying 7 people crashed near Wanaka in August 2014. His widow, Adele Box, says since the crash the Commission has done little to communicate with her about its investigation.
I understand that they can't specifically answer the questions. All I was looking for was some sort of guarantee that they are being very thorough. And I would really like to see some indication of actually when the report will be ready. And I don't want to see this done twice. I want some confirmation and some confidence that they're doing the right thing.
Adele Box. The Chief Executive of the Transport Accident Investigation Commission, Lois Hutchinson, says it could do better communicating with the families of crash victims. South Korea says North Korea fired at least one ballistic missile today, which flew about 800 kilometres before hitting the sea off South Korea's east coast. South Korea's Yonhap news agency said the missile was likely a medium-range Rodong missile. If confirmed, it would mark North Korea's first test of a medium-range missile capable of reaching Japan since 2014. The United Nations Security Council imposed sanctions earlier in the month in response to a nuclear test conducted in January, and the United States issued fresh sanctions this week. The chief negotiator of the Trans-Pacific Partnership says the trade deal is not a fait accompli. A number of attendees at the latest workshop on the controversial 12-member agreement said it was too late to democratically debate it because public submissions to a parliamentary committee had closed. The chief negotiator, David Walker, says submissions did close earlier this month, but late entries were being considered.
The Select Committee, in its examination of the text of the agreement and the national interest analysis, it closed its submission date on the 11th, but I think it did indicate that it was open to considering specific case-by-case requests for late submissions.
David Walker says Parliament will have to ratify TPP legislation before any deal comes into force. Into sport now, the Australia cricket captain Steve Smith says there's no reason his side's edge over New Zealand in world events can't continue at the World T20 in India. The two sides play in Dharamsala at the foothills of the Indian Himalayas tonight. New Zealand beat Australia in recent Chapel Hadley one-day series but lost last year's World Cup, and Smith believes that dominance can continue.
Don't see why not. In big games we have probably got a little bit of wood over them, so for us it is a new game, it's a new tournament, and it's about coming out here and executing our skills well, and if we do that, hopefully we'll be on the right end of it.
Meanwhile, the White Ferns play Ireland in their second match in Mohali tonight. They beat Sri Lanka in their opening game, and captain Susie Bates expects the pitch for tonight's match will suit her side.
Looked out there today, and I guess coming from New Zealand, we like to see a bit of green in the wickets, and we've got some pace bowlers that can make the most of that, so we'll be looking to bowl really aggressive with the likes of Leah Tahuhu and Sophie Devine, and with our batters we just play the ball and hopefully there's a bit of pace in it which suits us.
Susie Bates. The New Zealand pole vaulter Eliza McCartney has finished 5th at the World Indoor Athletics Champs in Portland and Oregon. McCartney cleared 4 metres 70 but failed her 3 attempts at 4 metres 80. Todd Greenberg has been appointed the new Chief Executive of the National Rugby League. Greenberg, who has been the NRL's head of football, takes over from Dave Smith, who resigned last year. And that's the news.
Hi, I'm Lynn Freeman, and on Standing Room Only, well, this is a first for us, a Persian Kiwi comedian. And no, we didn't find Pax Asadi in a Persian market. Audio Culture's Simon Grigg remembers the firm of Charles Begg, publishers and marketers of musical instruments. A new TV docudrama series about pre-colonial Māori warfare and weapons. And we meet the new broom at Shortland Street, producer Maxine Fleming. Rummage around, Standing Room Only, Sunday afternoon on RNZ National.
And the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Western Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow and fine spells increasing. The remainder of the North Island, cloudy areas and isolated showers becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland mainly fine, but a few spots of rain in Otago and Southland. Saturday morning from high cloud. Nelson, Buller and northern Westland, occasional showers developing. Southern Westland and Fiordland, rain developing this afternoon with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. It's now 6:08.
Leilani, for people watching on the telly, that's fine, but people listening on the radio, what they don't know is I sit beside you about a metre away when you read the news, and I wriggle. I wriggle like the kind of schoolboy that the teacher would say, sit still on the mat. And you do an amazing job of reading past me And you've been filling in for a month while Katrina's been on leave, and this is your last night. Have you enjoyed it?
I have. Thank you very much. It's been great.
We need to tell people, because I think this is one of the great jewels in the crown of RNZ, and not enough people know about it. You work full-time for RNZ International, right?
Yep, for RNZ, yep.
For RNZ. What's your round? Do you have a particular round, or do you just cover the South Pacific?
Cover the Pacific in general. So today I was doing stories on the new cabinet in Samoa. So, yeah.
It's such a great resource. How many full-time RNZ staff are there, roughly?
There's not many.
Yeah.
There's maybe 10.
Yeah, great team.
Yeah.
And you've got people filing bulletins in Pidgin up to the Solomon Islands. You've got basically people who are fluent in almost every language in the South Pacific.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been lovely seconding you for a month.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been wonderful working with you. Leilani Hamusia, who has been filling in for Katrina Batten for the past month. Have a great weekend, Leilani.
You too.
Talking of things RNZ's Insight programme has been looking at the operations of the Transport Accident Investigation Commission, TAKE, in a two-part programme that begins this Sunday morning. Jerome Box was killed when the Squirrel helicopter he was a passenger on crashed near Wanaka in August 2014. There were 7 people on board, including Mr Box's 4 friends, a pilot and a guide. Everyone else survived. Jerome's wife, Adele Box, told me that 18 months on, she still doesn't know what caused her husband's death, and she has frustrations about TAKE, summarised in a single word.
Communicate.
Tell you where they're at.
Give people confidence in your process, in your investigation. Communicate.
Why has it taken so long?
The report?
Yeah.
The investigation?
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
So you still don't know?
No.
So
I still don't know. I was asking, I contacted the investigator, who's my point person, the last week of February, because on their website, all the investigations that they're conducting have a estimated report date. And for Jerome's crash, it was March 2016.
Which is now.
So I contacted TAKE and asked if that was an accurate indication or if they would be extending the time frame. And I didn't hear back. That was when Lois contacted me.
So Lois is the CEO?
Yes.
And so the CEO contacted you, and what did she say?
She didn't speak to that point, actually.
So she didn't tell you why it was taking so long,
No.
or whether it was coming in March. So
No.
you still don't have any understanding of when you will get the report explaining how and why
No.
your husband died.
No. But I did go online the night before to see if it had been updated online, and it had, to September. But I hadn't heard that from TAKE themselves.
Sorry, so it's gone from March to September. How long will it be in September?
Oh, that'll be over 2 years.
So what did the CEO, Lois, say to you when she contacted you?
Well, she wanted to understand, initially she wanted to understand why I had made the comments I had to Peter. But I felt that it wasn't actually, I don't have an issue necessarily with the investigator. I have an issue with TAKE and their process and their communication.
And your complete and utter sense of confusion about when you're going to learn anything, why it's taking so long, and what's going on.
Correct.
I'm not putting words in your mouth
No,
here.
absolutely not. No, I need to know if they've done certain aspects of it. Have they checked? For example, I wanted to know if they'd checked the seatbelts. I was so confused that so many people had survived, yet Jerome hadn't. Did the seatbelts fail? Have they checked this? Have they checked that?
And do they answer those questions?
No, and I understand that they can't specifically answer the questions. All I was looking for was some sort of guarantee that they are being very thorough. And I would really, really, really like to see some indication of actually when the report will be ready. And I don't want to see this done twice. I want some confirmation and some confidence that they're doing the right thing.
So you still don't know why your husband died and why everyone else survived? You still don't know what happened?
I don't know, no.
And
I may never know, John.
And you thought you were going to know in March, which is right now, but you learnt yourself by going online, yourself from home, that it's now going to be September.
Correct.
No one had told you that?
No.
Even though you'd had a conversation with the CEO, she hadn't told you that?
I hadn't had a conversation with her at that point.
Right.
I'd had email contact with her. At that point, I hadn't had that Skype conversation.
Are you any wiser now about what's going on and why?
Absolutely not. And my confidence in their process has somewhat eroded. They have a duty to ensure that safety is looked at. And I just feel it's important to... I feel very confused. Their recommendations aren't mandatory. Their process seems to take an awfully long time. There's been other accidents in these 2 years. There were accidents previous to Jerome's that still hasn't got a report out. Almost a year previous. Still no report on that one. And so my question is, during the course of this time, could something have changed to make it a safer place? I don't know. Possibly.
So that's Adele Box, whose husband was killed in August 2014. The CEO of the Transport Accident Investigation Commission is Lois Hutchinson. I asked her why the investigation was taking so long and if TAKE had been communicating well enough with Adele.
Yes, well, in terms of the communications we have had with Adele, I know in speaking with her, I know she feels that she's in an information void. I do actually accept what she's saying in that respect. We have been in contact with her right through the process, but not as often as she would like, or perhaps I think it's fair to say in terms of what she needs. One of the things that concerns us is that we can't always answer the questions that she has. Her case, or rather the case that involves the death of her husband, is ongoing at the moment, and we're constrained under our Act as to what we can say. So just on that point, we can't discuss with her the details, and I accept, and I know it must be very challenging and difficult for her to have that information void filled when we can't speak to specific issues.
And this is the interesting thing, is that because you are constrained under your Act, and so therefore I guess what would be really helpful to Adele and everyone who wants to know what happened in this accident is that you get the report out. She was told November, she was told a published report about 3 months later, it was then pushed forward somewhat to March, it's now September, that's over 2 years. That seems on the surface a hell of a long time.
In terms of the work that we do in the world that we operate, our timeframes around 2 years are consistent internationally. It's a reflection of the complexity of the cases and the multiplicity of interests that we have to deal with. In terms of the investigation protocols that we're obliged to follow, we have to involve organisations like the manufacturer in the country of origin. We need to deal with the maintenance, look into the maintenance issues, human factors, a whole raft of issues, and that often involves us having to work with overseas interests as well. That can take a lot of time, particularly when we have to schedule contact. There's an expectation, for example, if we look at, say, the engine of the wreckage, that often involves an overseas organisation having to come and visit us.
So Lois, in the meantime, while you're doing this investigation, and you can't, as you've told us, because of the Act you exist under, prejudge, predetermine, pre-anything really, I guess the poor old families just have to sit and wait. And that's not your fault, but gosh, it appears on the surface to be inadequate, doesn't it?
Well, I think we, for ourselves, are mindful of the challenge and the difficulty for families who want answers, want to know, need to know, and to get closure. I have the utmost sympathy for them in that position. We do accept that we can do better. We recently got funding support from government, and we are endeavouring to set up a direct contact program with families so that we can at least keep them informed on the processes that we are going through, and keep them up to date on the next steps as best as we can, given where we are in the phase of our inquiry.
You just got funding support for money. There is a sense around TAKE, and this is from people we've been speaking to, that you have been underfunded, that if you'd had more money, you would have had more personnel and a better ability to address things substantively faster.
possibly more substantively, not necessarily faster. Again, the process is a system that is consistent across countries. So we're part of an international safety aviation system. So we all follow the same processes, and we're not out of step with our colleagues in that everybody in our world is constrained because there is so much happening and there is a lot of demand and imperatives on the organisations to deliver. But we still have to go in deep, and we still have to talk to certain groups to complete our inquiry. So it's not something that we can necessarily speed up. The difference is that we would have more expertise readily available and, if you like, more boots on the ground.
You seem to me to be saying that on the one hand you're constrained by the Act and you're constrained by the difficulties of getting to the bottom of things because it could be a mechanical issue, it could be human error, it could be terribly bad luck, and all of these factors have to be considered, and you have to go to the manufacturer, you have to go to witnesses, a lot of work. But also I wonder if you are saying to me the human engagement could be improved on. You could do better at talking to the families.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I don't think there's any argument in this organisation that that's the case. We do want to improve our engagement with families. My only concern is I don't think we will always meet their expectations on the information that they're wanting when they want it, other than once the report is published.
This is Lois Hutchinson, who is the CEO of Take, and you can hear more about Adele Box's story and Peter Newport's Insight investigation. That's on at 8 a.m. this Sunday here on RNZ National. And speaking of Sunday mornings, the program's host Wallace Chapman has a very special program lined up, so I asked him to tell us about it.
Well, I guess the feature interview, John, is this book. It's called In Dark Places, The Confessions of Taina Porter and an Ex-Cop's Fight for Justice. Now, we've heard all about Taina Porter before, haven't we? 20 plus years, a young man convicted of a crime he did not commit. But for the first time, this book lays bare how it happened, what happened. Why did an ex-cop in the top floor of an Otahu police bar, drinking a jug of beer, hearing all the arguments for and against Taina Porter years after, why did that get in his bonnet? He goes home to his wife years later and says, you know what, I want to ask you something. I want to follow this case and take it up. So he goes and visits Taina Porter, and it's the story of why Tim McKinnell risked his career to do that. It's a riveting book.
And if Tim McKinnell hadn't have done that, nothing we now know about Taina Porter would be known, right?
You're precisely right. That's what's chilling about this book. And this is why it's so interesting. What drives a person to do something like this? I've always been interested in that, whether it's, Joe Karam or what have you. And you're so right. If Tim hadn't done this, if Tim hadn't decided to put aside his private investigation career and do this pro bono for nothing out of the Hawke's Bay, Taina Porter, in all likelihood, would be there right now.
So who's your interview with on Sunday?
It's with Tim McKinnell and the person who wrote the book. His name's Michael Bennett, and Michael did a documentary on Māori TV about Taina Porter and was very close to the whānau. So,
and can he write?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I read a lot of books, John, and can I put this right now? This is my book of the year.
In March.
I read a lot of books, John. I read a lot of books.
It's that good.
It's in the last 12 months, I've read some books. This is right up there, 100%. Worth it. Listen in. Listen in, John.
Wallace, whose show is on Sunday morning. I will be listening in. Wallace, feedback, lots of feedback coming in on the TPP roadshows and tax. Frank attended the TPPA roadshow in Invercargill, and Frank described it as a crock held at the Chamber of Commerce, and non-members charged $45 to attend. I'm bewildered by that, Frank. I didn't think that was the case at all. You charge $45 for a nice ham sandwich or something. We're going to check that out. We're going to make calls. Nice bit of some bluffies. Some bluffies. And poorly advertised, says Frank of Invercargill. $45. I don't think that should have been the case for the TPP roadshows. We'll make calls. Re-tax. They go after people who might earn $50 cash in the weekend, but forget about multinationals who earn millions, says Grant. The interesting thing is, of course, that what's going on is legal, which is why the OECD is trying to rewrite effectively global tax laws. Our government will have to fix the multinational tax issue before the TPPA is ratified. Coming up on World Watch at 6:30 with Elizabeth Brown, another bid to reach a deal on solving Europe's a migrant crisis, and SeaWorld gives in to public pressure. A Māori trust is promising affordable homes on the Wellington waterfront to low-income iwi members. Its new 3-bedroom units will cost $600 a week in rent, which matches the cost of similar properties in the area and is not what you'd immediately describe as affordable. But as Lee Marama McLaughlin reports, whānau can apply for rent subsidies from the government.
Money isn't necessarily an obstacle for descendants of Te Aropa wanting sea views and modern city living in Wellington. A new Papakainga housing complex at Evans Bay will open for viewing for the first time tomorrow. A trustee of Te Aropa Whenua Trust, Taku Pārai, says it's about descendants returning home.
The idea around developing such a building like that was to ensure that we built an edifice to our tupuna of Te Aropa and then to be able to share that with their descendants. I mean, that's what Māoridom is all about, is being able to create a little sense of community that as Māori, you can live together as one.
It sounds good, and it may be, if you're eligible. The 3-bedroom units are only available to whānau with a household income of less than $100,000 per annum. The market rate is $600 a week, which doesn't sound terribly affordable, but those on a benefit or on the social housing register will be eligible for standard accommodation supplements, and Mr Pārai says that makes the properties affordable.
We took the gauge off the rentals as a whole around that particular area. So I think it falls in line with the current rent rate if you want to go that way. But it's also affordable housing around if you're on a benefit.
Property managers Dwell Housing says the subsidies are the same as those offered in other community or social housing projects. Its chief executive, Alison Cadman, says they don't know yet how many units will be solely reserved for people who'll rely on the government subsidies.
We haven't really been able to get anybody through to have a look, so people haven't made any commitment to living in there, but we're really confident that everybody will love them and they'll be very happy to move in and live there.
The Crown gave a grant to Te Aropa Whenua Trust to build the $3.6 million complex. Te Tumu Pairua coordinated the project, and spokesman Basil Tapuke says with about 1,000 landowners represented by the trust, developing the land is a feat.
Now we've reached this point in time where we've actually can stand back, I think, and look back at the buildings that have been built that will house whānau in a Papakainga environment here in central Wellington, which is quite unique.
All the single units already have tenants lined up, but there are several larger units still up for grabs. A ceremony will be held at the Papakainga early tomorrow morning to bless and officially open the complex. For Checkpoint, ko Lee Marama McLaughlin tēnei.
27 minutes past 6 is Friday night. People eat takeaways on Friday night. Domino's Pizza says it's highly likely that New Zealand will be the first country in the world to have dinner delivered by robots. The Domino's robotic unit, or DREW, is a driverless four-wheel delivery machine. The company's just unveiled the prototype and is now in talks with the New Zealand government to trial it here. Domino's New Zealand General Manager Scott Bush told our reporter Alex Ashton there are 6 other countries in the running, but the Ministry of Transport seems very keen.
The Ministry of Transport are just standing there, their hands out, saying, look, when can we see him? What can we do with him? How can we work closer with you guys? So that's really exciting, and sooner that we can push the button on that, the sooner I'll be able to answer that question holistically and say, yeah, well, here's a date, and this is where we're going to trial him, and this is how we're going to go about it.
Have they put any money into it?
No.
So it's just Domino's funding all of this?
Correct, yeah, 100%.
As a consumer, though, I mean, at the moment I call up and I order a pizza and it gets delivered to my door. What's the difference if it's a person doing it or Drew, the robot?
Obviously, look, that's a really good question. Obviously, the first thing is that we'd like to think that it's slightly safer. There's a lot of technology being thrown at Drew to really enhance his interaction with the customer. We'd like to get to the stage, or we're definitely going to get to the stage where our customers still have the choice to either have a delivery by Drew or by a human. So in no means is it something that's going to stamp out our drivers or drastically reduce our driver numbers.
Are you foreseeing, though, that there would be jobs cut, like delivery jobs? I'm thinking a lot of teenagers do them, first job. Is Drew going to replace some of them?
I don't think so, Alex. I think our business will grow exponentially and we'll be able to absorb those numbers. So, I wouldn't foresee it being something that would necessarily replace massive numbers of drivers or anything like that. We'll always need humans to make pizzas and still deliver pizzas as well.
We're going to end tonight with feedback on the tax issue, multinationals tax. Good afternoon, John, says Peter from Rua Tangata. Oh, kia ora, Peter. When Revenue Minister Michael Woodhouse said but early in his interview, I knew it was coming, but it was the same but as in but it's a waste of time putting tickets on the windows of some unregistered, unwarranted cars in the council car park because we can tell you they won't pay the fine, but we'll ticket cars whose owners we reckon will pay. Easy money. They'll get the easy money chasing the small New Zealand businesses to the ends of the earth, but the big overseas outfits are untouchable. Frank says a far simpler way to change the tax law is to eliminate income tax and GST and replace them with a transaction tax. That way tax is paid every time anyone pays anything to the transnationals. It would have many other benefits too numerous to list here. And Tony Wallace has sent us a long email, and sorry Tony, I've blown it on the time front, but he basically says tax avoidance by multinationals is nothing short of financial terrorism and needs to be treated as such. On behalf of our excellent checkpoints, and if you can see some of, we take that control room shot, we didn't take it. Have a wonderful weekend.
And now RNZ News headlines at 6:30. I'm Paul Brennan. Good evening. A truck driver has been crushed to death at a recycling centre on Auckland's North Shore. Steel and Tube now says it does not have a laboratory for testing its reinforcing mesh. Computers, mobile phones, documents and data taken during an illegal police raid have been returned to the journalist Nikki Haga. And the widow of a man killed in a helicopter crash in 2014 has criticised the Transport Accident Investigation Commission for failing to communicate properly with her about the investigation. Those are the headlines. Our next news at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Elizabeth Brown. Tonight, another bid to reach a deal on solving Europe's migrant crisis. Claims of warnings before this week's